The heavy oak of my front door slammed against the interior wall with a force that rattled the china in my dining room cabinet. The sound was a violation, a sonic crack in the stillness of my Tuesday afternoon. It was just past 2 p.m. in Willow Creek, a time I usually reserved for quiet tasks. Today, it was folding laundry. I left a stack of clean towels on my bed and stepped into the hallway, my heart already hammering against my ribs. Liam's furious footsteps were pounding the hardwood, a rhythm of pure rage I hadn't heard since he was a volatile teenager. "Mom, where are you?" His voice, usually so measured, was a raw bellow that echoed up the staircase. I found him in the living room, a space he had grown up in, now standing like a hostile stranger. At 45, my son was a successful financial analyst. He was breathing hard, his face a dangerous shade of crimson. His expensive suit jacket was rumpled, his silk tie yanked loose, and his fists were clenched so tightly his knuckles were white. His green eyes, the same shade as his late father's, were narrowed, fixed on me with a terrifying hardness. "Why did Jessica just call me hysterical?" he demanded. "She said you changed the PIN on your card. She was at the grocery store, Mom. A full cart. You humiliated her in front of a dozen people." I stood frozen in the doorway, my 72 years of life experience feeling suddenly inadequate. I had navigated widowhood, raised a son alone, and built a secure life. But this was different. This was my child, my only child, screaming at me in my own home. "Liam!" "Lower your voice," I said. My tone was firm, though a tremor ran through my hands. "We are civilized people." And yes, I changed the PIN on my credit card, because it is my credit card. "Yours?" he laughed, a short, barking sound devoid of humor. "We're a family, Mom. You don't just pull the rug out from under your family when they need something." He took 2 aggressive steps toward me. For the first time in my entire life, I felt a knot of genuine fear in my stomach when looking at my son. He was taller than his father, broader. He filled the room with his fury. "The card is in my name, Liam," I repeated, holding my ground. "It is my money." "Your money? Are you serious?" His words were like projectiles. "Are you going to be this selfish, this petty? Jessica was just buying things for the house, food, cleaning supplies, normal, everyday things." I knew that was a lie, a cold, calculated lie. I had reviewed the statements just last week, sitting at the antique desk Arthur had bought me. I had seen the charges with my own eyes, the numbers blurring through a sudden hot sting of tears. $200 at a high-end cosmetics counter, $400 at a designer boutique, $600 at a restaurant I had never even heard of. But I chose not to bring it up, not right then. The foundation of our relationship already felt like it was crumbling. "Son, if you and Jessica need financial assistance for something specific, we can sit down and discuss it like adults," I said, moving past him to sit in my armchair, the same chair where I had nursed him 45 years ago. I needed the familiar, solid feel of it beneath me. "But I will not leave my card open for anyone to use as they please." "Anyone? You're calling my wife anyone?" His voice climbed another octave, cracking with indignation. "She is your daughter-in-law. She is the woman I love. She is family." He paced the room like a caged animal, his expensive shoes scuffing the floor Arthur and I had so carefully refinished. He was sweating, despite the cool air circulating from the vents. "I can't believe what I'm hearing," he seethed. "You've been generous your entire life. You helped the neighbors after the fire. You gave to every charity that knocked on your door. And now, when your own family needs you, you're acting like a miser." That word, miser, it struck me harder than a physical blow. Me, Eleanor Miller, the woman who had worked double shifts as a nurse for a decade after Arthur died to ensure this boy wanted for nothing. The woman who had paid for his entire college education, who had given him the down payment for his first apartment. I stood up from the armchair, my back protesting but my spine stiff with resolve. "I will not allow you to speak to me that way, Liam. Not in this house." "Then give me a reason. A single, coherent reason why you would change the PIN overnight without telling us." "Because I reviewed my statements," I said, my voice quiet but cutting through his rage. and I found thousands of dollars in expenses that I never authorized." He stopped pacing. The sudden silence was deafening, broken only by his ragged breathing. The veins on his neck pulsed. "All of those expenses were discussed with you." "No, Liam, they were not. Jessica told me she cleared every single purchase with you first." "Then Jessica is lying." The words hung in the air, heavy and irreversible. The air crackled. Liam looked at me as if I had just slapped him. "I will not," he said, his voice dangerously low, "let you insult my wife." "I am not insulting her. I am stating a fact. The fact is, you're getting paranoid." He shot back, his eyes cold. "Maybe it's time we started talking about having someone else manage your finances, someone more stable." It was a tactical nuke, and it landed perfectly. My own son, suggesting I was incompetent, suggesting I was losing my mind. The room swam for a second. The laundry on the bed, the unwatered azaleas outside, the fury in this room, it all blurred into a kaleidoscope of betrayal. "I think you need to leave, Liam," I whispered. "I'm not leaving until we fix this. Give me the new pin. Right now." "No." I held his gaze, my own fear transmuting into a cold, hard anger I hadn't known I possessed. "This is my house, Liam. This is my money. The answer is no. If Jessica needs groceries, she can ask me, and I will be happy to buy them for her." He stared at me for a long, terrible moment. Then he nodded slowly, a dark understanding passing over his features. He walked to the door but stopped with his hand on the knob. "This isn't finished," he said, his voice stripped of all its earlier heat, leaving only ice. "We'll talk again when you're ready to stop this childish tantrum." "It's not a tantrum, Liam. It's a boundary." "It's foolishness," he spat, "and you're going to regret it when you see how this affects our relationship." The words hung in the air, a clear and present threat. My own son, threatening to withhold his presence, his love, if I didn't give him access to my money. "Are you threatening me?" "I'm warning you. Jessica is deeply hurt. Your accusation has devastated her. I don't know if she'll be able to bring herself to see you after this." "Then that will be her decision." Liam shook his head, a look of profound contempt on his face. "You know what? You're right. This is your decision, and we will be making ours." The door closed with a dry, final thud. I was left alone in the living room, trembling so hard I had to sit back down. The begonias on the patio, visible through the window, were drooping, in desperate need of water, but I had no strength left. I walked to the window and watched Liam's silver Lexus speed down the street, taking the corner so fast the tires squealed in protest. 45 years of motherhood, 45 years of sacrifice, of unconditional love, of pride, and it had all come down to this. My son, my world, screaming at me in my living room because I had dared to protect what was mine. The silence that reclaimed the house was different. It wasn't the peaceful, comforting quiet of my morning routine. It was a dense, heavy, and suffocating silence. I sat in my armchair and closed my eyes, the entire encounter replaying in my mind, Liam's words, his tone, the sheer entitlement, all for a 4-digit number. But I knew, in the deepest part of my soul, this wasn't about a pin. It wasn't even about the money. It was about control. It was about the fact that for the first time in his entire adult life, I had finally, unequivocally said no. The phone rang, its shrill cry slicing through the quiet. I let the answering machine pick it up. Jessica's voice, high-pitched and laced with a theatrical tremor, filled the room. "Eleanor, I know you're there. I hope you're happy with what you've done. Liam is devastated. I just don't understand why you're being this way with us. We're your family." Click. The line went dead. I took a slow, shuddering breath and opened my eyes. The clock on the mantel read 3:30 p.m. The day had begun with such normal, banal tasks. Now, it felt as though I had aged a decade in under 2 hours. I went to the kitchen. I needed to do something with my hands, to reclaim some sense of normalcy. Cooking had always been my refuge. As I began to peel potatoes for a late, solitary lunch, I couldn't shake the image of Liam's face, The anger was familiar, a flashpoint he'd always had. But the coldness, the calculated cruelty, that was new. That was Jessica. And I knew, with a certainty that chilled me more than his rage, that this afternoon was not an ending, it was just the beginning of the nightmare. For 30 years, my life had been governed by a routine that was my strength and my solace. I rose at 6, made coffee in the same French press Arthur had given me the Christmas before he passed, and checked on my garden as the Ohio sun began to warm the patio tiles. It was an organized, predictable, and safe life. After Arthur's funeral, when Liam was just 15, I learned that structure was the only thing that kept the walls from closing in. Meal times, study times, bedtimes. Clear rules and firm boundaries. That's how you raise a good man, I had told myself. This 2-story colonial had been our refuge for 40 years. Arthur and I bought it with a loan we'd scrimped and saved to pay off. Every corner held a memory. The worn patch of grass in the backyard where Liam learned to ride his bike, the kitchen where I'd prepared thousands of meals, the living room where we'd celebrated every milestone. My neighbors in Willow Creek knew me as Eleanor, the woman who always had a spare cup of sugar, the one who organized the neighborhood watch, the one who brought soup to Mrs. Carter when she had the flu. Generosity had been my way of honoring Arthur's memory. Liam had been a good son, studious, respectful, affectionate. When he graduated from college, top of his class, and landed his first job as an analyst, my pride was immeasurable. My sacrifice had been worth it. We were a team. He handled my taxes. I made his favorite pot roast on Sundays. Everything changed the day he met Jessica. He brought her home for Sunday dinner. I was in the kitchen, tasting the gravy. He walked in with a smile I hadn't seen since he was a teenager, holding the hand of a willowy brunette with meticulously manicured nails and a dress that cost more than my monthly grocery budget. "Mom, this is Jessica, the woman of my life." Jessica smiled, her teeth a perfect bright white, but her eyes, as they scanned my living room, were not smiling. They were assessing, evaluating, calculating. Her handshake was firm, her skin cold. "It's such a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Miller. Liam talks about you all the time." Over dinner, she was the model of charm. She praised my cooking, asked about my garden, and laughed at all the right moments. She seemed genuinely interested in our family. When they left that night, I'd felt a cautious optimism. The next few visits were just as pleasant. She brought me orchids, helped clear the dishes, and told amusing stories about her job at a downtown art gallery. Liam was radiant, happier than I'd seen him in years. And that, I told myself, was all that mattered. The wedding was small but exquisitely tasteful. I paid for half of it without being asked. He was my only son. Jessica, of course, chose everything: the venue, the flowers, the menu. I just signed the checks and smiled for the cameras. For the first few months of their marriage, the Sunday visits continued. Then, the favors began. It started innocently. "Eleanor, could you possibly lend us a few hundred? We're just a little tight this month with the new apartment expenses," Jessica asked, her voice sweet and apologetic. "It's just $300. We'll pay you back on Friday." I gave them the money without a second thought. They were newlyweds. It was normal. Friday came, but the money didn't. Instead, another request arrived. "Mom, can you spot us another $500? Jessica's car needed new brakes," Liam said. "My bonus doesn't come in until next month." 300, then 500, then 1,000. Always with the same promise: "We'll pay you back." Always with the same excuse: "We're just a little tight." After a year, my loans totaled over $10,000. When I gently brought it up over roast chicken, Liam grew defensive. "Mom, you know we're good for it. I don't understand why you're keeping a running tally. We're family." "Of course we are, dear," I said. "But $10,000 is a significant amount of money." Jessica intervened, her smile bright and placating. "Eleanor, you're absolutely right. We've been so careless. Tell you what, why don't you hold on to my card as collateral?" I didn't want her card. I wanted my money. But I accepted, not knowing how to navigate this new, transactional relationship with my son. A week later, Jessica called, her voice frantic. "Eleanor, I have an emergency. My card is being declined. I think the bank flagged it for fraud, and I need to buy medicine for my mother. Can I please borrow your card? Just for today? I'll bring it right back." I hesitated. "Just for medicine?" Yes, just for medicine. I'll be at your house in 10 minutes. I lent her my card. That night, a knot of anxiety twisting in my stomach, I checked my statement online. There was the charge, $85 at the pharmacy. I felt a wave of relief, followed by a flush of shame for doubting her. But then I scrolled down. There were other charges. A $150 charge at a day spa. A $220 charge at a boutique called Finery. When I confronted her, Jessica's eyes filled with tears. "Oh, Eleanor, I'm so sorry. I was at the mall anyway for the prescription, and I saw a dress for a work event. I just thought, I'll pay you back, I promise. This Friday." She didn't pay me back, but she did continue to ask for the card. The emergency for her sister's birthday. The emergency for the shoes she needed for a wedding. The emergency of Liam's anniversary gift. Always emergencies, always with promises of repayment. After 2 years, my life savings, the nest egg Arthur and I had so diligently built, was dwindling at a terrifying rate. Every time I tried to set a boundary, Liam made me feel guilty. "Mom, I don't get why you're being so petty. You have plenty. We're just trying to build our life." Petty. The word echoed in my mind for weeks. The Sunday visits became tense. They would eat my food, drink my wine, and the conversation would invariably circle back to money. Bills they couldn't pay. Opportunities they were missing. "If we just had a more reliable car, I could take on more clients," Liam would sigh, eyeing the new model on TV. "And if we could just move to a better neighborhood, it would be so much better for our future," Jessica would add, scrolling through listings on her new phone, a phone I was fairly certain I had paid for. One afternoon, I sat at my desk and did the math. In the last 6 months alone, nearly $26,000 had vanished. I was spending far more than my pension and Arthur's modest investments brought in. I was financing a lifestyle for them that I couldn't even afford for myself. I couldn't sleep that night. My morning routine brought no peace. The coffee tasted bitter. Something had to change. That's when I called the bank and requested a new card, citing the old one as lost. And I created a new PIN, a number known only to me. That was Tuesday morning. By 2 p.m., my son was in my living room, his face purple with rage, calling me a miser. For 3 days, my house was encased in a profound, eerie silence. No calls from Liam, no texts from Jessica. It was the silent treatment, a tactic Liam had perfected as a teenager. They were waiting for me to break, to call them, to apologize and offer up the new PIN. On Friday morning, I decided to face the abyss. I had spent 2 years avoiding the full picture. It was time to see the real damage. I sat at my desk, logged into my bank account, and clicked on Statements. The number on the screen made me feel physically ill. 2 years ago, my savings account held just over $80,000. Today, it was $34,000. Nearly $46,000 gone. I printed every statement for the last 24 months. The printer whirred for 30 minutes, spitting out page after page of my own naivety. I spread them on the dining room table and began to categorize. Groceries, utilities. These were mine, but then the rest. March, $800 at a high-end electronics store. April, $1,200 at a jewelry store. May, $600 at a spa resort. June, $900 on designer apparel. Page after page, every month, thousands of dollars on things I would never buy, in places I had never been. I called my bank. "I need to report unauthorized transactions," I said, my voice shaking. "I see, Mrs. Miller," the bank representative said. "We also show a cash withdrawal from an ATM 2 nights ago at 3:15 a.m. for $500. 3 in the morning? I was in my bed, asleep. Yes, it appears someone has your card and your PIN, but that's strange." "What's strange?" Well, at the exact same time as that ATM withdrawal, 3:15 a.m., there was another purchase made online at a clothing retailer based in New York. A card cannot be in two places at once. A cold dread, heavier than any I had ever known, settled over me. What does that mean? It means, Mrs. Miller, he said gravely, that someone has made a copy of your card. After I hung up, I went to my bedroom, a terrible new suspicion dawning. I opened my jewelry box, the one Arthur had given me, tucked beneath my wedding pearls and his old watch. I found it. A crisp, clear photocopy of my credit card, front and back. The 3-digit security code was perfectly visible. In the corner, a note in Jessica's loopy, insincere handwriting. Just in case, emergencies, is less than 3. When had she done this? When had she been in my room, in my private things? The phone rang, and I jumped. The caller ID read, Jessica. Eleanor, how are you, honey? Her voice was treacle-sweet, as if the argument 3 days ago had never happened. I've missed you. Listen, I have the tiniest favor to ask. I'm trying to buy Liam a surprise online, but I seem to have misplaced my wallet. Do you remember the security number on your card? The little 3-digit one on the back? The audacity. The sheer, breathtaking audacity. She had a copy. She knew I had changed the PIN, so she couldn't use it in stores. But she could still use it online, if only she had that number. Where is my card, Jessica? I asked, my voice dangerously calm. Oh, I have it right here. You gave it to me to hold on to, remember? For emergencies? I don't recall that, Jessica. I need you to return my card. Today. Why? Did something happen? But Eleanor, how will we handle emergencies? We'll have to bother you every time. Yes, I interrupted. Yes, you will. You will have to ask my permission. A long, cold silence. You know what? She said, her tone shifting. We should talk about this in person. I'm on my way. No, Jessica. Just bring me my card. I'm on my way, she repeated, and hung up. 20 minutes later, Liam's Lexus pulled up. Jessica got out, alone. She rang the doorbell. I opened it. Hi, Eleanor, she smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Can I come in? She sat on my sofa and pulled the credit card from her designer handbag. She placed it on the coffee table, just out of my reach. Here it is. But before I give it back, I think we need to talk. Talk about what? About why you suddenly don't trust us. About why you're treating us like criminals. About why you've changed so much. I haven't changed, Jessica. I am simply protecting my assets. Protecting them from us? She stood up and began to wander my living room, picking up a framed photo of Liam, trailing a manicured finger along the dusty mantel. Eleanor, Liam, and I love you. We would never hurt you. But lately, you seem to see us as the enemy. I just want to know where my money is going. Don't you trust my judgment? She asked, turning to me, her expression one of profound, theatrical hurt. After all this time, you still think I'm a stranger? She sat down again, closer this time. Look, Eleanor, I get it. When women reach a certain age, it's normal to become more cautious, a little forgetful, even a bit paranoid. Paranoid, the same word Liam had used, paranoid for wanting to control my own money. Paranoid for thinking your own family is stealing from you? The words slipped out of her mouth so naturally, it took a moment to register. Who said anything about stealing? I asked, standing up. I needed the distance. Your actions did, Eleanor, she said, her voice hardening, blocking the card, demanding it back, treating us like this. What is that, if not an accusation? I want my card, Jessica. Of course. She finally pushed it across the table. I grabbed it and put it in the pocket of my house dress. But I hope you understand, she continued. This is going to make things very complicated. Every time we have an emergency, we'll have to call you, bother you. Every time Liam needs something for work, you'll have to go out of your way. That's fine by me. Are you sure? She asked, a strange gleam in her eye. Emergencies can happen at all hours. When you're asleep, when you can't get to the bank. I walked her to the door. Before she left, she turned back, her face a mask of sorrow. You know what the saddest part is, Eleanor? After all this time trying to be the daughter you never had, you still see me as a threat. That hurts. It really does. Her eyes welled with crocodile tears. For a split second, I almost felt guilty. Almost. You are my son's wife, Jessica, but my money is mine. She nodded, the sad mask slipping as she walked back to the car. That night, I couldn't sleep. I took the photocopy of the card from my jewelry box. A perfect copy. Planned, deliberate. I wasn't paranoid. I had been a fool. The other options Liam had threatened arrived on a Monday morning in the form of a knock on my door. It wasn't Liam. It was a man in a sharp, inexpensive suit carrying a leather briefcase. Mrs. Eleanor Miller? Yes? My name is Mr. Haynes. I'm from the law firm of Haynes, Becker, and Associates. Your son, Mr. Liam Miller, has retained our services regarding a delicate family matter. My stomach turned to ice. What matter? Mr. Miller is deeply concerned about your recent mental and financial capacity, the man said, his tone flat and rehearsed. He has documented instances of your paranoia, confusion, and erratic decision-making. He is considering initiating a legal process to obtain guardianship over your finances. Guardianship. The word hung in the air, sucking all the oxygen from the room. Excuse me? A process, ma'am, where a judge determines if you are capable of managing your own affairs, or if you require a conservator to handle them for you. Someone like my son. Precisely. I sat down heavily in the entryway. My own son. My son was going to try and have me declared legally incompetent, all for money. What do I do? I asked, my voice a broken whisper. I'm just the messenger, ma'am. I would advise you to hire your own attorney. The man left, leaving me in the echoing silence of my home. My son, my Liam. He was going to try and steal my life. I called my neighbor, Evelyn. She was a retired judge, sharp as a tack, and had always been a kind, if distant, acquaintance. I needed someone. Evelyn, I'm in trouble. Can you come over? She was at my door in 5 minutes. I told her everything. The loans, the card, the copy, the $46,000, and finally the man who had just left. Evelyn listened, her expression growing stormier with every word. Eleanor, she said, taking my trembling hands, this is not paranoia. This is classic, textbook familial financial abuse. They are manipulating you, gaslighting you, and now that you've fought back, they are escalating to the nuclear option. He's my son. He's a criminal, Eleanor, and you need to fight him. You already lost the son you thought you had. Now you have to fight the stranger who's trying to take your home. Do you know a lawyer? I know the best, she said, a grim smile on her face. His name is David Sterling. He specializes in elder financial abuse, and he hates losing. The next morning, Evelyn drove me to David Sterling's office. It was not flashy, but solid. Bookshelves lined with legal texts. Mr. Sterling was a man in his 60s with kind eyes and a calm, methodical demeanor. Mrs. Miller, he said after I had recounted my story, all the bank statements spread between us. What you are describing is a crime. Our first step is to defend you against this guardianship petition. Our second is to recover your money. Over the next week, David and his team worked with terrifying efficiency. They subpoenaed security footage from the stores. They tracked IP addresses from the online purchases, and they found something worse. Eleanor, David said at our next meeting, his face grave, it's not just the $46,000. They used your personal information, your social, your date of birth to open 3 other credit cards in your name. What? They were mailed to their address. The total debt on those 3 cards is an additional $18,500. I felt sick. So I owe. I owe over $64,000. No, David said, his voice firm. You owe nothing. You are a victim of identity theft. We are filing a criminal complaint for fraud. That night, Liam called. Mom, what did you do? His voice was high-pitched, frantic. We got a summons. You're accusing us of fraud? Because you committed fraud, Liam. We're your family. It was all for us. You have to drop these charges, Mom. You're going to ruin our lives. You already ruined mine. Please, we'll pay it all back. I promise, we'll get a loan. Just stop this. And the $18,500 in credit cards you opened in my name? A dead silence. How? How did you know about those? I have a lawyer, Liam. He started to cry, a gasping, desperate sound. Mom, please, don't do this to me. I'm your son. You should have remembered that 2 years ago. Then this is war. His voice changed, the tears vanishing, replaced by a cold, reptilian fury. This is war. You don't drop this, and I will see you in court. We will prove you're crazy. We'll get witnesses. You'll be left with nothing. He hung up, and the war began. First came the calls, at all hours, pleading, then threatening, then the harassment. One morning, I woke up to find my car tires slashed. The next day, crazy old hag was spray painted on my garage door. Evelyn insisted on staying with me. Then, the whispers. Neighbors I had known for 20 years suddenly wouldn't meet my eye. Jessica and Liam had been busy, spreading their poison, telling everyone I was senile, paranoid, dangerous. One night, the phone rang at 3 a.m. I picked it up. It was Jessica, her voice a distorted whisper. I hope you're happy, you old witch. Did you know Arthur wasn't the saint you thought he was? Ask about his business trips. Ask about the women. I hung up, shaking. They were attacking my husband's memory. They would stop at nothing. Evelyn, I whispered in the dark. I'm scared. I know, she said from the spare room, but we're going to win. The court hearing was on a Tuesday in March. I arrived with David and Evelyn. Liam and Jessica were there, looking pale and pinched. Their lawyer was a young, slick man who couldn't stop checking his phone. The judge, a no-nonsense woman named Judge Patel, reviewed the case. Liam's lawyer went first, painting a picture of a confused, paranoid old woman lashing out at her loving, concerned son. He presented witnesses, 2 of Jessica's friends who swore I'd been acting erratically. Then David stood up, and he systematically, brick by brick, dismantled their entire world. He presented the bank statements, the $46,000. He presented the evidence of the 3 fraudulent credit cards, the $18,500. He presented the security footage from the jewelry store, showing Jessica, not me, buying a diamond bracelet. He presented the phone records, the late-night, harassing calls. He presented the police report for the vandalism on my property. But the final, devastating blow was the cross-reference. He showed footage of Jessica at an electronics store buying a TV at 8:17 p.m. on a Thursday. Then he produced my landline phone records, showing a 45-minute call I was on from my home at that exact time. It is physically impossible, Your Honor, David said, for Mrs. Miller to have authorized this purchase, as she was at home, and her card was clearly in the possession of her daughter-in-law. Finally, my family doctor, Dr. Chen, testified. He confirmed that my medical exams showed a cognitive capacity in the 99th percentile for her age group, and that I was in no way, shape, or form incompetent. When the judge finally spoke, her voice was quiet but full of controlled fury. Mr. and Mrs. Miller, what I have seen today is not concern. It is a predatory, systematic pattern of familial financial abuse. The petition for guardianship is not only denied, it is deemed frivolous, malicious, and an act of profound cruelty. She ordered them to repay the full amount, all $64,500, plus my legal fees. She issued a 5-year restraining order, prohibiting them from contacting me in any way. And she referred the case to the district attorney's office for criminal charges of fraud and identity theft. Liam was white-faced, staring at the floor. Jessica was, for the first time, silent, her perfect mask completely shattered. We walked out of the courthouse into the bright March sunlight. I had won. My home was safe. My money was, eventually, coming back. My dignity was intact. But I had lost my son. The victory felt hollow, cold. I had won a war I never wanted to fight. 6 months later, my life found a new normal. The court-ordered payments arrived every month. My savings were slowly rebuilding. More importantly, my peace of mind had returned. David Sterling had supervised the payments. Our professional relationship had, slowly, evolved. He would stop by to have me sign papers and stay for coffee. He, too, was a widower. We talked about gardening. We talked about books. We talked about the quiet loneliness of a house that was once full. One Sunday afternoon in October, he was helping me prune my roses. "Eleanor," he said, setting down his shears, "these past few months, I've come to admire you more than any client I've ever had." "You saved my life, David." "No," he said, taking my hand. "You saved your own. I just held the paperwork. I find I'm much happier when I'm here. With you." We were married in the spring, in my garden, with Evelyn as my witness. It was quiet, simple, and perfect. David moved in, bringing his law books, his laughter, and a profound sense of peace I hadn't felt since Arthur was alive. We built a life together, one based on mutual respect, shared interests, and the simple joy of companionship. I heard, through Evelyn, that Liam and Jessica were divorcing. The stress of the criminal charges and the restitution had broken them. Liam had taken a plea deal, avoiding jail time, but now had a felony record. He called me once, a year after the wedding, violating the restraining order. "Mom." His voice was thin, defeated. I just saw a picture of you. You look happy." I'm sorry, Mom. I was wrong." She made me." "No, Liam," I said, my voice kind but firm. "I was no longer that woman. She didn't make you do anything. You made your choices. Can you ever forgive me?" "I already have, Liam," I said, looking out at David, who was planting new azaleas by the porch. "I forgave you so I could move on, but forgiveness and trust are two very different things. I hope you find your way, son, but my way is no longer with you." I hung up the phone. At 7-4, I learned that it is never too late to defend your dignity. It is never too late to say no. It is never too late to start over. I lost a son, but I gained myself. And in the most unexpected season of my life, I found a true, quiet, and respectful love. Life had taught me that sometimes the only way to truly save your family is to be willing to lose it.